I have been engaged in mental health work for the past few decades, especially the 12 years I have worked in Peking University, mainly doing psychological intervention for Peking University students. 01. There is a problem with the water in the pond. No matter how long the fish grows, there will be problems. Let me tell you some basic data. According to the National Health Psychological Survey conducted by the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the detection rate of depression among middle school students is 24.7%, and 1/4 of the children have depression symptoms. According to an epidemiological survey conducted by the National Health Commission, 17.5% of children and adolescents have psychological and mental disorders. According to a study conducted by Nanjing Brain Hospital, the incidence of non-suicidal self-injury among middle school students across the country is as high as 27%. These data show that serious mental health problems are attacking the youth group. It is no longer an isolated problem. The proportion has reached 1/4 or even higher. What is the reason for the problem? One of my basic points of view, this really needs the attention of the whole society. Because, every family has children, and children are our most important people. For example, in 2015, the smog across the country was very serious, and the smog would directly lead to a soaring incidence of respiratory diseases and even cancer. I saw a document yesterday that the average concentration of PM2.5 in smog increased by 10%. The incidence of esophageal cancer has increased by 18%. Therefore, if the smog is not properly controlled, it is obviously not enough to rely on doctors to treat respiratory diseases. In my 26 years of practice, the problems of children and adolescents have become more and more serious. This cannot be solved by adding psychiatrists. This is a drop in the bucket. When there is a problem with the water in a pond, no matter how long the fish in the pond grow, there may be problems. I believe that every parent has the feeling that the children nowadays are really unhappy. Now, there is a strange phenomenon in adolescent education. Although we can meet the material needs of children, the children seem to be less and less happy. Children's scores are getting higher and higher, but their learning motivation is getting lower and lower, and their creativity is getting worse. When I was in class at Peking University, I felt that our classrooms were getting quieter, students were getting better at writing notes, and their homework was getting more and more beautiful, but I rarely saw unique insights, and the courage to challenge teachers and authorities. I'm just going to talk about a very typical thing that I have experienced. 2 years ago, I taught a course called Psychological Trauma Therapy at Peking University, and students would have 2 weeks of trial listening to 2 weeks later, a student came to me and asked me, he said, "Mr. Su, I think your class is very rewarding, the lecture is very good, and the knowledge is very wide, because it talks about the historical trauma of human beings." I said, "I welcome you to choose this course." But his next question made me very angry. He said, "Mr. Su, did you score high in this course? My final grade is very important. If you give me a low score, I will not choose your course, because it will affect my grade point." The reason I am angry is, do you go to the best university, you can listen to the best teacher's class, and the best things you get are not important, but the score that matters. Scores are the least important thing, but why children put so much importance on academic performance is an increasingly common phenomenon. Our learning conditions are getting better and better, but children's weariness of learning is becoming more and more common. Take the parents of Haidian as an example. Haidian can be said to be the most advanced district in education in the country. We tried our best to buy a school district house for our children and attend expensive cram schools, but the children resented, refused, and even turned against their parents. The harder the parents work, the worse the parent-child relationship will be. In the past few years, we have conducted more than 10 discussions and nearly 100 interviews with directors of education bureaus, principals, and teachers across the country. I have done at least tens of thousands of hours of psychological counseling for thousands of children. Walking into their inner world, I found that the children are getting more and more miserable, the teachers are getting more and more tired, and the parents are getting more and more anxious. No matter how hard you try, the children will not cooperate, and everything will be lost. We are still in a state of more involution and friction. In this regard, I want to talk about 3 things. 02. Academic pressure. More and more children lie flat and quit. Today's children study hard, are tired of school, and have a lot of homework. I have a deep feeling that the whole society is very anxious.
你可
From
以
a
吃个饭，出去
psychiatrist's
散
point
散
of
步
view,
或者
we all have generalized anxiety,
好吗
some unfounded worry, and excessive
？OK，
worry about things that haven't
我很
happened.
担心你。
We are always afraid that the child
Okay.
will lose everything if he makes a
Sushi.
careless move,
带着
and
手
his life
机
will be
拍
ruined.
照片 ，OK。
Now the senior high school entrance examination
一会儿
is
我要
more
去拿
stressful than
吃。
the college entrance examination, and the senior
Okay,
high
bye-bye.
school entrance examination has to be diverted. If a child cannot go to high school, his life will be ruined. Children feel that life is not happy, because he has no time to be happy, and even feels that life is meaningless. All his time is given to study, homework, and exams. More and more children began to lie down and quit. My daughter was in her third year of high school. She cried a lot the day before yesterday, and her grades were not satisfactory. Compared with her good friends, my daughter has not improved much. I talked to her about 12 o'clock last night. I would like to ask parents 3 questions. Will our love for our own flesh and blood be less because she didn't get into the ideal school in the end? Can you accept that your child is not as good as you? Can we accept that our children are not as educated as I am, their grades are not as good as mine, and their income is not as much as mine? Are they not as good as us in this generation? Imagine such a scenario. If the child can go to King Bay as long as his academic performance is good, I am willing to turn against him. Are you willing? I believe that everyone is unwilling. But in psychological counseling, I found that whether it is a middle school student or a college student, there are too many such situations. 03. Parent-child conflict. Today's kids have changed, and parents haven't kept up. What I especially want to tell you is that parents are eager to seek swords. What is the most typical manifestation of this cut boat and seek sword? Just mentioned, can we accept that our children are not as good as us, but you have to understand how to say not as good. It must be higher education, better academic performance than you, and earn more money than you. Is it that one generation is worse than the other? One of my basic observations is that people of our generation did, through their own efforts, enter colleges from rural areas and cities, go to prestigious schools, and even study for a PhD. We are quite satisfied with our own life, and then we have ideas, hoping that our children can copy our success, but can life be copied? Times have changed dramatically. Once there was a visitor, a high school girl, who went to the roof of the school building twice, which was very dangerous. After we rescued her, we did a family counseling session. As soon as the family sat down, they began to quarrel. The content was, what is happiness? The parents of those born in the 60s are professors at a university in Beijing. Their answer is that if you eat well and dress warmly, you will be happy in life. As soon as the child heard this, she became anxious. No wonder you think that I don't know how to be blessed when I am in the midst of blessings. You think that you should be happy if you have enough food and warm clothes. I am not happy about it at all. Because she has never lost, never lacked these things. She said, my happiness is very simple and has nothing to do with money. I hope to have an equal and respectful dialogue with my parents. After she finished speaking, her parents were also anxious and said, why do we treat you unequal, disrespectful, and undemocratic? We are terribly democratic, and you have to make decisions on everything we do. What else can we do? The child turned the parents back with one sentence, leaving the parents speechless. She said, you let me make a decision, but if my ideas don't match yours, you will definitely persuade me to accept your argument, so it's all fake democracy. I've known this for a long time, so every time I guess what you think and I'll give you the answer, but it's not my decision, it's not my life, it's not my life. When parent-child conflict occurs, what is the most wrong thing for parents? I designed the best path for him, and I gave him the best things. Why didn't he want it? Why did he make that mistake? Try that mistake. I answered the parents in this way, the biggest capital of young people is that they can make mistakes. You just let him make one mistake. He just wants to do this thing. Maybe you think this is not the best choice, but it is his choice. I would rather choose an option that I want than the best option someone else has arranged for me. The more you arrange and control, the more disgusted he is, the more he feels that this is not my life, and it is not my life, and I can stop it at any time. A person needs to have many things to support himself. In addition to academic performance, interpersonal relationships, sports, labor, and friends are all great wealth in life. If all these things are unimportant and all that matters is the score, we will narrow our path. Why is the child hollow? Because I feel that life is worthless and meaningless. Because we don't give our children the best things, they even deny and demean themselves because of this. 04. What can parents do best for their children? Peking University students have to do mental health education every year when they enter school. I have found that the most difficult idea to convey is patriotism. Why patriotism? What is our relationship with the country and the nation? I feel that what we have now is the result of our own efforts. But don't forget that we are building on the foundation of national rejuvenation and national prosperity in the past 40 years. Because the country is getting stronger and stronger, everyone's good life will be guaranteed. What is culture? People's hearts are in danger, and Dao's heart is weak. What is Dao Xin? Confucius clearly explained, the way of learning lies in Ming. What is Matilda? Mencius further explained, what is the core concept of Confucian culture? It is benevolence. What is benevolence? The heart of compassion is the end of benevolence. Therefore, altruistic behavior, people are inherently good and altruistic, can help others, can contribute to the country and the nation. This thing is a huge self-affirmation, no need to be taught, it will be humane. Wang Yangming said that a benevolent person is the heart of heaven and earth. This is a huge difference between Chinese and Western cultures. Chinese culture believes that people are born with a conscience. But why is our child hollow now? Why are they anxious, depressed, self-denying? Professor Yan Liangxi of Hunan Normal University and I cooperated to study the relationship between conscience and emptiness among middle school students and college students, and found that conscience has 8 hearts: gratitude, filial piety, responsibility, right and wrong, compassion, shame, and forgiveness heart, honesty. We should educate our children to have these 8 hearts. This is the instinct and wisdom of being a human being. Our children are unhappy because we are doing the opposite. Family education and school education should return to learning as adults, calling and helping our children upgrade their minds. Now the material is getting better and better, and the country is getting better and better. The next step is to make all people become more and more noble and beautiful people. 05. The way to crack the mental illness of contemporary adolescents. I think this affects every family and everyone, so we must use the determination and thinking to control the smog, to control the sick environment of education. Learning cannot talk about competition. This sentence was said by Mr. Gu Mingyuan, the honorary president of the Chinese Society of Education and from Beijing Normal University, which benefited me a lot. We are now overly competitive and have lost our original intention of education. Examinations are for better learning and mastering knowledge, not for final academic performance. Studying is only for the exam, and you will get tired of studying in the end. To reduce children's stress, deal with parents' anxiety first. It is found in clinical practice that parents are often more anxious than their children, and the transmission of anxiety by parents to their children is the most important reason for their children's problems. Let me summarize what parents should not do. First, parents must not give their children their anxiety and pressure. Second, don't involve children in relationship problems. If there is a disagreement in the relationship between husband and wife, you should resolve it yourself, and don't let your child be a sandwich biscuit. Third, don't just give money without love. Fourth, don't overprotect, spoil your children, or break the rules. Fifth, don't use grades as the only criterion for judging your child. Parents must do. First, accompany children to grow up and enjoy the role of parents. Second, our wealth is to give children more freedom of choice. We must pay attention to protecting children's creativity, enthusiasm for learning and life, not academic performance. We often force children out of anxiety and depression because of academic performance, but the most important thing is his lifelong enthusiasm for learning, love for life and creativity. Now that ChatGPT is very popular, will we humans be replaced by AI? I have also discussed with many first-class experts. You know that the most unlikely thing for human beings to be replaced is out of nothing. We must cultivate children's gratitude and enthusiasm for exploring the world, and not be destroyed by grades. Third, listen to your child. There are both education and rules, as well as understanding and respect. We must understand that their world is much different from ours, so we must listen to our children. Finally, behave in the world and practice what you do. Professor Jian Liken, a famous professor at Peking University, once made such an assertion that today's colleges and universities are cultivating refined egoists, who are villains in terms of Confucian culture. Because we have not raised our children to be gentlemen, I think our family education should cultivate our children to be gentlemen that our culture recognizes. 1 More and more students suffer from hollow heart disease. I work in a university and am a psychiatrist, a school counselor, and a PhD in clinical psychology. In addition to providing counseling services to students in colleges and universities, my very important work is suicide prevention and crisis intervention. So my next topic may be a little heavy. This is a case I have come across. A very excellent student can become an excellent scientist and scholar with his intelligence, personality, and emotional intelligence in dealing with people. But we worked hard with his parents and all his teachers for 4 years, but in the end we still couldn't make him really get better. I have experienced many such cases in the past 3 or 4 years, and there are more and more cases, which reminded me of a word called hollow heart disease. What does hollow heart disease mean? I have obtained the consent of some typical case visitors, and read to everyone some of the words they wrote and said to me. I felt like I was on an island torn apart and didn't know what I was doing, what I was going to get, and I felt fear from time to time. In 19 years, I have never lived for myself, and I have never lived. A top student in the college entrance examination said this after a failed suicide attempt. Study well and work well is the basic requirement. If I study well and work well enough, I can't live. But it doesn't mean that I am happy because I study well and work well. I don't know why I want to live. I am not satisfied and always want to do better in all aspects, but this kind of life seems to have no head. This is another student's description. There are many more such examples. My world is a lawn full of mist. There is a well on the lawn, but I don't know where it is, so I may accidentally fall into it while walking. At the bottom of the dark well, I broke my leg and shouted desperately. I felt like I had no ego at all. It was all so hard. What they have in common, as they told me. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I've been. Where is my ego? I feel like I've never been in this world. I've been living for someone else for the past 19, 20 years. I don't know what kind of person I want to be. 2 Not just students hollow out. In July this year, my wife and daughter were on vacation in Mauritius. At about 1400 hours Beijing time, one of my college students sent me a WeChat message, which read, "I have a bottle of magic potion in my hand now, and I don't know how it tastes." He was a suicidal student, so I rushed to reply. I asked him what kind of water it was, and he told me it was potassium cyanide, which kills in 10 seconds. This is the longest distance crisis intervention I have ever carried out. Of course, this child was rescued and he is a very good student. In May of this year, one day when I was in evening class, an off-campus psychological counselor called and said that a visitor was a student who seemed to have committed suicide by taking poison in the dormitory. I asked what was going on, started the crisis intervention program, found this classmate in the dormitory, and sent him to the hospital for rescue. I have known him for 4 years and he was very good when he entered the school. In the first semester after entering Peking University, he was the first in the college, but just in that semester, even before that semester, he had the experience of attempting suicide. He was originally a particularly good kid who could do a good job in academics and scientific research. In the past 4 years, our psychological counseling center, his parents, and the teachers of the department have tried their best to bring him back on track. For 4 years, he was hospitalized, took medicine, and all treatments were exhausted, but he still had no business. In the end, his parents decided to let him give up his studies and drop out of school to go home. When I heard this news, I was very sad. I've seen a lot of really good kids, and the ones I'm talking about now are the best students in prestigious schools. Many of them have serious mental health problems, and even tried to give up their lives repeatedly. There is an excellent doctoral student in science and engineering who completed his research in his 2nd year and reached the doctoral level. This is what his supervisor told me. He tried repeatedly to give up his life. He was hospitalized twice, took all the drugs, all the treatments for electric convulsions. When I was discharged from the hospital, I asked him how he was doing, and he said that the psychiatrist was childish and ridiculous. If I acted happier, they thought it would be fine if I was depressed. What I want to say is that he is not an ordinary depression, but a very serious new condition. I call it hollow heart disease. We often say that if a child has a problem, probably the family and the teacher have the problem, and the child itself will have no problem. 03 What is hollow heart disease? Empty heart disease is a more vivid term, maybe I can tentatively call it psychological barriers caused by value defects. Hollow heart disease looks like depression, low mood, loss of interest, and antonia. If you go to a psychiatric hospital, you will definitely be diagnosed with depression, but the problem is that all drugs are ineffective. Let's take a look at the main manifestations of hollow heart disease. It cannot be regarded as a very strict diagnostic standard, but it is a common feature that I have continuously summed up through contact with such students in the past 3 or 4 years. They are often very good children, or the good boy in people's eyes. 1. In terms of symptoms, it may be in line with the diagnosis of depression. It can manifest as depressed mood, loss of interest, and antonia. But unlike typical depression, all these symptoms are not very serious and prominent, so the appearance may not be different from other classmates or most other people. 2. They experience strong feelings of loneliness and meaninglessness. This kind of loneliness comes from as if there is no real connection with the world and the people around them, and all connections become very illusory. More importantly, they don't know why they want to live, and they don't know the value and meaning of living. What? They have achieved very good grades and achievements that seem to be an addiction, a drug. They seem to spend a lot of time living, studying, and working hard for a sense of fulfillment. But when he found that all those things were obtained, his heart was still empty, and he felt a strong sense of meaninglessness. 3. Usually the interpersonal relationship is good. They are very concerned about what others think of them, and they need to maintain a good self-image in the eyes of others, and they need to be a good child, good student, good husband, and good wife. But it seemed like all of this was being done for someone else, so it was very hard work and very exhausting. 4. Not sensitive to biological treatment, or even ineffective. We have many cases, treated in the best psychiatric hospital in China, used all the drugs, and even used electric shock therapy, once, twice, 3 times, but none of them worked, which means that it seems that biological factors are not the major factor in their problems. 5. Have suicidal ideation. This kind of suicidal idea is not due to the difficulties, pains, and setbacks in reality. In their words, it is I don't want to die so much, but I don't know why I still live. I don't know the value of my life at all. What is it, the walking dead of life every day? If so, it might as well end sooner. So they tend not to end themselves in such painful and tragic ways, such as burning charcoal, hanging themselves, and taking medicine. 6. It has not been a day or two for these visitors to have such problems. He may have been confused like this since junior high school, or even earlier, and he may have attempted suicide before. 7. Finally, traditional psychotherapy is not effective. Their problems probably cannot be solved by changing negative cognitions, or even by studying the problems of their original family, not by early trauma. You will find that they have a good relationship with their parents, although there are conflicts of one kind or another, but generally not the typical parental divorce, early attachment, early foster care issues. As psychiatrists, we have a good trump card, that is, if any depressed patient is treated with electroconvulsive therapy, he can recover quickly in a short period of time, but electroconvulsive therapy is useless for hollow heart disease. They have a strong sense of loneliness and meaninglessness. They have been the best and most well-behaved students since they were young. They also need to be praised by others, but they have strong suicidal thoughts. Go on, what is the value and meaning of living, so they will use a more gentle way, and of course give us a chance to rescue him. However, the core problem is the lack of values to support its sense of meaning and existence. I have done a statistic that 30.4% of first-year freshmen at Peking University, including undergraduates and postgraduates, dislike study or think that study is meaningless. Please note that this is the winner of the college entrance examination battlefield. There are also 40.4% of the students who think that living life is meaningless. I am only living according to other people's logic. The most extreme thing is to give up on myself. So we come back to a very ultimate question: why do people live? What is the meaning of life? What is the most important thing for us? Their situation is not new. They will tell me that I have had such doubts since I was in junior high school, and it is only now that I have made the decision to end my life. Traditional Western medicine and psychotherapy have no effect on them. At this time, for a crisis interventionist, a psychological counselor, or thousands of parents and educators, we are also facing unprecedented challenges. We also have to face the same question, that is, what is the value and meaning of life? Do we have it in our hearts? If we don't have them, how do we give them? 04 Anxiety Economics. Let's take a look at the current situation in China. I use a word from Anxiety Economics. I do think that the way of spending money blindly will make people anxious, collapsed, and fearful. This is probably a feature of our era. Let's take a look at the prevalence of mental disorders in China. In the 1980s and 1990s, only 1 out of 100 Chinese people suffered from mental disorders, and this figure had reached 17.5% by 2005. There are 1,000 people here, and 180 of us here should go to Anding Hospital, should see a doctor, and may not be optimistic. How did the Chinese mental disorders become so bad? In fact, we don't have any biological diseases, and the incidence of schizophrenia remains the same all the time. Over the past 30 years, something has grown: anxiety and depression, anxiety and depression. We can take a look at this data. The incidence rate of anxiety disorders was about 1% to 2% in the 1980s, and now it is 13%. The data I am using now are published by the World Health Organization in the highest medical journals. Data from the National Epidemic Hospital Survey. At least 13 out of every 100 Chinese are suffering from anxiety disorders. Even worse is the incidence of depressive disorders. I have been a psychiatrist for 20 years. When I first became a psychiatrist, the incidence of mental disorders and depression in Chinese was 0.05%. Now it is 6%. It has increased by 120 times in 12 years. It's an explosive growth, and I think there's something very absurd about it. The past 30 years have been the 30 years of rapid economic development in China. The incidence of anxiety and depression has also increased rapidly. What happened? The data shows Americans are more depressed than we are, and their depression rate is 9.5%. The reason why I talk about the United States is because it seems that we have been greatly influenced by the United States in the past 30 years, and of course we have our own inherent culture. Let's take a look at the current education. I'm sorry, what I'm going to say next may offend everyone. Is our education helping children grow up, or is it destroying a generation of children? Beginning around 2000, during winter and summer vacations, a large number of students will come to the mental hospital. They are internet addicted, anxious, compulsive, and their relationship with their parents has serious rupture. Parents have the courage to send their children to the mental hospital. Go, it can be seen that there is really no way to clean up. What is our dealing with the problem? Sending them to internet addiction schools and subjecting them to electric shocks. Is that education? This is to shirk responsibility. Parents and education are the root of the problem. We don't see the root of our problem. We only see him hiding in internet cafes to play games. Why he hides in internet cafes to play games is because of the failure of education. The greatest achievement of our education seems to be students doing test papers. There is a popular saying, 1 point improves and kills 1,000 people. Do you know? The biggest challenge for me to do psychological counseling is how to reverse the values of classmates. Are the classmates around you your enemy? He is the greatest wealth in your life. What is our classroom like? Constantly implying that the child commits suicide, and he can sacrifice his life for good grades. The suicide rate in the whole country has dropped significantly, but the suicide rate in primary and secondary schools has increased. In this case, our children can't wait to go to college, and they start to commit suicide in elementary and middle school. Let's take a look at what some schools are doing to deal with it. All hallways and windows have iron bars. I work in a mental hospital, which is what a mental hospital is like. My doctoral thesis was done in a prison, which is what a prison looks like. But we have the ability to turn the school into a prison and a mental hospital. Just watch these children, let them go to college, and then let them be my visitor. 05 How are refined egoists cultivated? What I'm going to talk about next will make everyone even more frustrated. In a preliminary investigation, I performed a family profile of the suicidal student, assessing the families from which the child came. Children in what kind of family and what kind of occupation their parents are more likely to attempt suicide. Primary and middle school teachers. This is a crisis sample of 38 students, 50% of whom are from teachers' families, and the control group is children who do not have problems. Teachers' families are still very successful, among which 21% of all families come from teachers' families. The question is, why do children from teachers' families have so many problems? In my opinion, looking at scores and ignoring even the education of students' morality, physical education, and aesthetic education has become the educational view of many teachers. They fully approve of this educational view, and implement the same or even more vigorously for their children. It is the main reason for the high incidence of mental health problems in children of teachers' families. After the commercialization of education, Professor Jian Likan of Peking University has a description and conclusion that I think is very accurate, and he is called an exquisite egoist. How are refined egoists cultivated? If I were to answer this question, I would say this: we parents and teachers are refined egoists, and they learn from us. We sometimes falsify data for a good scientific research result. We can give up our moral and ethical bottom line in order to earn money. As a doctor, we can receive red envelopes to get kickbacks, special tutoring classes. Children, on the other hand, learn from us. 06 What is education for? What is education for? What is school for? What is the university for? Let me first quote the speech given by Lin Jianhua, president of Peking University, when he took office. He made an answer to this. He said, "What kind of strength can Peking University contribute to the development of the country and the nation? What does the country and the nation need Peking University for? This is the mission of Peking University." After he finished speaking, more than 800 people in the audience burst into applause. But we seem to have abandoned these long ago, and we think that noble things are not worth mentioning. What we need is to make money now. But the students are no longer recognized, because they are not short of money. This is the value of our society. We believe that earning money is the biggest winner in life. There was once a student who dropped out because studying economics and management was not what he wanted at all. When he filled out the college entrance examination and wanted to study history, he was ridiculed by everyone, saying that he only studied history when his brain was flooded. Later, this classmate asked to drop out of school even though he was good at economics. During the November holiday, I took the students to Wannan Cemetery, because I want to find the value and meaning of life with the students. We saw a very unique tomb in the cemetery, on which was a teacher named Ying Quan. Teacher Ying Quan died unjustly during the Cultural Revolution in 1970, and she had no children. 19 years later, her students bought a cemetery for her and wrote this eulogy. In the past 40 years, I have followed good guidance, cultivated the community, devoted myself to teaching, and have always been consistent. I have suffered innocently and been humiliated. The teacher has been honest and innocent throughout his life, without any stains. His sentiment and aspirations are enough to be a model for today's people. I don't know how many of the educators present here will have such evaluation or affirmation of you at the end of their lives. What I want to say is that education itself is a very sacred profession, but if we regard education as a tool for making a living, as a means of obtaining money, or to achieve other goals, of course this is a choice, but I will feel as if we are giving up the most important thing. 07 Pick up what was lost. I would like to ask another question here. This is my thinking after going through these things. When I communicate with those students with hollow heart disease, why can't they find themselves? Because their own parents and teachers failed to let them see how a person can live with dignity, value, and meaning. This is probably the root cause. I want to ask everyone and myself, do we respect ourselves? Do we respect our profession? Do we regard our profession as a kind of mission and calling, to appreciate the profound meaning? Where do we spend our time and energy as parents? Have we given our children real love and companionship? In this era of buying a basket and returning the pearl, I think we throw away a lot of things. Like parents, we only seek instant gratification. When we spend all our time and energy on earning money and fail to give our children the best companionship and love, it is no wonder that the children have no problems at this time. Our current consultation volume has increased exponentially, 50%, 100%, and the frequency of our crisis intervention has also increased by 100%. Before children enter school, they are already desperate. Therefore, as a psychological counselor and psychologist in colleges and universities, I appeal, really save the children. They entered colleges and universities with serious problems, and they were educated by exams, and their creativity was destroyed by education that strangled their necks. A graduate advisor told me a true story. He said that a student always has problems doing research, which is a very pediatric problem. The mentor talked to him and asked him why these problems occurred and what to do. This student was the first to take the written test, and he said, "Teacher, then I will copy the mistakes I made 100 times." A graduate student corrected his mistakes by recopying 100 times. Our children have not grown up at all, and are still in elementary school. What did education do? I think that no matter we are parents or teachers, we should be people worthy of the respect of students and children. We should set an example and set an example. We want to give them the best things in the world, not points, not money, but love, wisdom, creation, and happiness. Please give them a wonderful life.